Mini episode 1302 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode 1302. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here. And we are here today to engage in something we have done previously on this show many times, which is to take a look at the NFL at mid-season. And what we specifically will be doing today is bringing in fellow FDH Lounge original dignitary Chris Galloway for these purposes. And because we are always fond on the show of such wordplay here, I will note that Chris is fully qualified to come in and help us audit the NFL at midseason, and dare I say, Chris has a mandate to come in and audit the NFL at midseason with us. So, with that said, Chris Galloway, welcome back in, my old friend, as we take a look at the AFC here at midseason.
Thank you, Rick, and I would suggest that mandate is probably only valid in one county in Ohio, so.
Well, Chris, this show is global. It can be heard anywhere. We'll extrapolate that mandate globally for you for these purposes anyways.
There you go.
So, as we
always a pleasure to be joining
you. Thank you. Always fun talking on any topic with you, as we have going back to 2007 on the show, and previously many times off air, going back to certain dorm rooms and off-campus apartments back at the Harvard on the Hocking back in the day. But when we, as memory serves, once in a while we talked football then too. But as I have said previously on the show, I had said this, I think, last year, 2019, that the year that we met, 1990, was the last year I ever had optimism for the Cleveland Browns, and I did going into 2019. We'll take a look, obviously, as we're doing the AFC. We'll touch on the Browns here in 2020. It looks like I was just a year early on that, although past the trading deadline here, I do have some bones to pick, smaller though they may be than usual. But let's just start by taking a look here at the whole kind of landscape that we're dealing with. We anticipated this coming into the season, what we were going to be dealing with the COVID-19 situation. And thus far, there have had to be some games rescheduled. And I've said to the guys in my fantasy football league, some of my good friends, you know, when we were dealing with the disruptions and guys being out, games being postponed, like, I don't know, this still feels like less than we were expecting in August. You know, like when our fantasy football leagues, when our commissioner set down all these things, well, if this happens, we're going to be ready for this and all these things here. So in the one sense, it's unprecedented. And in another sense, what we've dealt with thus far doesn't feel like as bad as it could have been in August, particularly given the challenges of playing outside of a bubble. How do you see it?
Well, I think overall the NFL's done a really good job of containing this thing and being able to move forward with their games. I don't think they're out of the woods yet, and I think that they obviously should be working on some contingencies if they need to move the Super Bowl back 3 or 4 weeks. You know, they should. I thought they should have at least initially built that flexibility in with extra bye weeks right out of the gate, to be honest. And for a couple of reasons. One, knowing you'd probably have to cancel and reschedule some games. Two, this year, as you and I discussed in our preseason previews, the belief that we were going to see a lot of soft tissue injuries.
Yes.
And putting a lot of guys on the shelf for multiple weeks, and we've seen that. Our worst fears have come true, and I just think, you know, had they built in a few extra bye weeks, that and just done it out of the gate, that they would have given the players a better opportunity to get that little bit of extra rest in a season where they didn't get the preseason work. I think it just would have been a helpful thing for all the organizations, regardless of, you know, whether they have a game canceled due to COVID or, a facility being shut down. I mean, we've seen teams have to deal with missing many players to COVID, shutting down their facility, and not being able to practice the week of a game. I mean, these are real disadvantages to a squad, especially with the lack of off-season. So I think by and large, the league does a good job to keep the train on the tracks and keep it moving. They're not out of the woods because I do think that, as we're seeing now, both in the U.S. and globally, the sort of a resurgence of second wave of the virus, and there's still a real possibility as we get into the cold months, we get into that typical flu season where suddenly we could have potentially big outbreaks. So I think there ought to be the clubs, other than some minor issues here with a few clubs like the Raiders and the Titans, using somebody like the Cleveland Browns as an example, they've gone to great extremes to do everything they can from a protocol standpoint to make sure that they're keeping their people as safe as they possibly can. So credit goes to the league for, you remember, Rick, a lot of people said, they're going to have a bubble. They can't do this without a bubble. And of course, a lot of us, I even said it, like, how do you do football in a bubble? There's too many people. It's not the NBA. It's just, the teams are larger, the support staff are larger. You're going to play games all in two stadiums. I mean, like, how's that work? So it wasn't a reality for the NFL logistically to do a bubble. And that said, I think with the reality that they've been dealt, they've done a good job.
I was one of the people that I thought they should have explored it, but I do agree with what you're saying. There's too many logistical challenges probably looking at it now to have pulled off. I agree with everything you're saying there. They're certainly not out of the woods yet. The spikes this past week have been shocking, not merely going over 100,000 cases domestically for the first time, but 125,000 cases. Optimistically, in the Southern Hemisphere, Australia has had an extremely mild flu season preceding us, and there's hopes that that will be the case here as well, but we don't know. It's not necessarily predictive. Hopefully it will be in that regard. But yes, the medical system is already under a lot of strain. Field hospitals being readied in places such as Utah and Wisconsin. So yes, the worst is yet to come this winter. Hopefully the NFL can make it through that. You talked about the lack of preseason, and of course that leads into, there's always a debate whenever these things happen here about, is the offense going to be ahead of the defense or vice versa? Sort of the equivalent of pitching versus hitting in baseball, of who's always going to be ahead when there's not a lot of lead time. Thus far, answered early on, the offense has been way ahead of the defense. I did read a very interesting story on CBS Sports this morning about how third down defense in the league has been sort of putrid, and that is a reason that scoring has kept up because teams keep going on drives. By the way, I know the Browns aren't the worst in third down defense, but they've certainly given up enough prolonged drives. If you've watched as much Browns football as I have this year, anecdotally that makes sense to you. Tennessee has basically a historically putrid third down defense to this point. It seems to me for them that'll probably even out the rest of the way, but any thoughts, theories, whatever on that part of it? Because you did call the soft tissue injuries thing, and my phone was blowing up with texts from you every time somebody got hurt early in the season, as you pointed out in your predictions. But as far as this part here, as far as the offense being way ahead, again, this is a golden age of offensive innovation in the league. Teams like the Browns were putting in new systems, as I pointed out previous to the season, that other teams weren't going to have film on. You said it would be a lot like college football at the beginning of a season where teams wouldn't have film on the other teams with no preseason. But thoughts, generally speaking, on why the offense is so drastically ahead of the defenses at this point?
Well, I think we've seen the teams that had no changes in their schemes and quarterbacks and coaching in the first half of the season are ahead of the teams that had change. Just about universally. We expected that, especially without an off season. The teams that have been together, coaching consistency, same quarterback, they're in a better spot. I expect that to even out over the second half. I think, honestly, Rick, I don't know how much of it is just the season, or whether it's just that we're reaching a point where the league is getting what they wanted. They've made so many changes to the rules and to handcuff defenses to up points because the league understands where their bread is buttered. People love offense. People love scoring. Fantasy football is a huge moneymaker now for the NFL in terms of driving eyeballs, marketing, and everything else. And you can't have fantasy football that's worth a damn if every game is 7-3. So they know that they've been driving it towards this, a reality where the offenses are going to score a lot of points. And I think to your other point, some of the innovation that's now spilling over from college and the RPOs and these quarterbacks that are becoming more dual threat. Let's be honest. That between the defensive changes and the handcuffing and the offensive changes, we are in a golden age of quarterbacks.
Yes.
We have more quarterback success now coming out of college and into the NFL. It used to be, draft a quarterback and 1 out of 10 succeed at best. Now you've got, honestly, 6, 7 out of 10 are succeeding.
Yeah.
That's because the game is changing, and it's also changing because the NFL is in some ways simplifying their offenses, adapting more of the college. And I think the explosion in scoring is probably more because that's now really ripe. Now that fruit is ripened now in the NFL. It's taken several years. We've seen it coming, and I think that those grapes are now they're ready to eat. And so now you've got quarterbacks like Justin Herbert who had a lot of people doubting whether he'd be a good NFL quarterback. He just steps in as a rookie and he's just crushing it.
Yep.
We didn't used to see that, and now honestly, remember we always used to say you draft a quarterback like, well, you got to give him 3 or 4 years.
Right.
You can't judge him on the first year. Honestly, now you kind of can. If you're a team, you can give a quarterback 2 years and go, nope, you're not it. Bye-bye. We'll move on and grab the next guy. Honestly, I think we've reached that point. So I think that it's a little bit of both. I think that you've had some teams with some turnover. But I think the biggest thing is it's not necessarily a COVID thing or a 2020 thing. I just think it's this several years in the making, and it's been building to the point now where with the rule changes on the defense and all the new the offensive adaptation from the college schemes, that now scoring is just through the roof now. It's finally arrived in its full form.
What an excellent point. Yes, I think that is very, very much accurate. That yes, this is a culmination of what's been happening over the years. As far as quarterbacks go, yeah, both Herbert and our boy, the Bobcat at heart, Joe Burrow. You look at the immediate success that they have had with challenging circumstances around them on those teams to varying degrees. And I think also, too, as far as making instant impressions on quarterbacks, yes, Josh Rosen has been through the NFL equivalent of speed dating now in a couple of different locations. So judging quarterbacks earlier is definitely becoming a thing. And that's actually a good segue
Well,
to...
and honestly, for Cleveland fans, that's the problem right now for Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
I know there's been system changes. I know there have been, he has not been dealt a great situation, right?
Right.
But he's in year 3, and you're watching him, and you're watching Joe Burrow, and you're watching Justin Herbert, and you're going, we don't have a quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean, there are moments, the second half of that Cincinnati game, or I should say the last 2 quarters, but most of the season for Baker Mayfield has been subpar. And so I don't think it's unreasonable for Browns fans to look at what these other QBs are doing and go, clearly this guy in the new NFL, not based on what it was 10 years ago, but the way it is now, it's like, what's wrong? Now, I will say, let's see what happens with OBJ out next week. Guys come back healthy. I'm not done on Baker yet. I definitely want to see where his trajectory goes the rest of the year. But he's a great example of where now you compare him to somebody like a Herbert or a Burrows, and you go, you and I had this conversation before the season. I remember we had a text conversation, and I said to you, right after the draft, or right before the draft, I said, right before the draft, would you trade Mayfield to the Bengals plus our number 1 to get Burrow? And you and I both said yes.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and you see why now at this point. And that's where, and again, Baker is definitely the 4th quarterback in this division. That is not necessarily an insult when you look at this division, and that it is more or less tied on a regular basis with the NFC West for toughest division in football. One division that is not, and there is one team at the top, and it is because of a fellow quarterback. Among other things, it's because of a fellow quarterback from the class of 2018, Josh Allen. You look at the Buffalo Bills, and they are 6-2, leading the division here at this point. Miami 4-3 at midseason, New England 2-5, the Jets 0-8. There are many divisions here in the AFC where things aren't wildly different than what we would have expected at the beginning of the season. And I look at this division, and Miami might be up just a shade from what we might have thought, and certainly they started rough but have recovered. New England might be down just a shade from what we would have imagined. A lot of us pictured them as probably about a 500 team. I thought the Jets were going to be awful, but I thought they'd at least win 3 games for the season. What did I know? 2 or 3 games. They're not going to really manage that at this point. They're historically bad. So the AFC East is just, again, around the margins. Buffalo at 6-2, probably, they're definitely not as good as their record. I think we would agree. But not many surprises in this division. Teams may just be off a little bit from what we thought coming in.
This division is pretty much right on par with what we thought. We thought the Bills would be good, that we thought they'd lead the pack and they'd win the division. I think I had, and I don't have it in front of me, you could probably remind me, I thought I had the Patriots at 6-10.
I think so, yes.
I was not a believer in them, and I come back to Bill Belichick's 51-65 record as a head coach without Tom Brady.
Yep.
Despite everybody else in the world saying he's the greatest coach ever and a genius, I've never bought into that. Mm-hmm. I look at his body of work without Tom Brady, and he's below 500.
Yep.
Period. And that includes the 11-5 season with Matt Castle, with what was otherwise, other than quarterback, a really great Patriots team.
Right.
So, if you were to take that record out, his coaching record is dismal. So I never believed in the Patriots. They had too many guys sitting out. They had a huge hole at quarterback, and there were too many question marks. So they're kind of right on pace for what I thought. They may actually just end up underperforming. They might not even get to 6-10. But you're right. The rest of that division is coming along. I've been very impressed with Josh Allen. I know he struggled the last couple weeks, but when is the last time we saw a guy improve their accuracy from college to pro?
Right. Yeah. Doesn't happen much.
That doesn't happen. And the fact that it's not like he's improved it by 2 points. He's improved it by 12 percentage points.
That's right.
He's gotten much better.
Right.
I still think he's kind of shaky in accuracy on the deep ball, but that's probably just never going to be fixed. But it's a real testament to Sean McDermott and his staff, and to Josh Allen's work ethic that he's put in the time, clearly made the effort to become a better quarterback. And that is so rare and almost nearly impossible to become a better quarterback at the highest level.
Sure.
So kudos to him. I think that's the thing that jumps out to me. And Miami, look, their program and they clearly have great synergy between their head coach and their GM. They're moving in the right direction.
Yep.
If you're a Dolphins fan like you are,
yep.
You've got to be happy about what you're seeing. And I think the only thing you can actually look at right now, and it's way too early, is Tua going to be the guy?
Yeah.
I don't, I think there were, despite some of the high praise, I still think there were question marks coming out of Alabama. The historical failures of Alabama quarterbacks under Nick Saban, Tua's height versus his athleticism. He's not this shifty and fast like a Russell Wilson. In some ways, he's kind of a little bit more like Baker in terms of size and ability to scramble and whatnot.
Sure.
Although Tua's more athletic than Baker, I mean, hell, I'm more athletic than Baker, and I'm a fat 40-year-old man. I don't think if you're the Dolphins, you definitely need to see to the rest of the year, to the point that we just made about getting new quarterbacks every couple of years, until you find the one that works, because I think there's a lot of pressure on Tua to see if he, in fact, can be what he was at Alabama.
Yep.
And the Jets, why don't we talk about the Jets? They're awful. They're terrible. Adam Gase is going to play out the string this season, and he's going to get dumped. I feel bad that the Jets ruined Sam Darnold.
Right. That's a crime.
Maybe they can deal him to somebody else for some picks. There is also, you could also give thought that if you get a better coach, a better, quarterback coach, and you beef up that O-line more, that maybe Sam Darnold isn't ruined, and if you put him in the right system with the better coaching, maybe you keep Sam and you sell the number one pick for a massive haul, and you use that haul to basically just fill the cupboard in all the positions that are lacking on your team. Maybe if Sam had a better team around him, the end result wouldn't be so bad.
Well, I mean, ruining Trevor Lawrence after you've ruined Sam Darnold, I struggle to think. I mean, it's almost like going from the tragedy of World War I to the tragedy of World War II. I mean, I struggle to come up with an analogy, but it'll be much worse to ruin Trevor Lawrence, and you know what a big homer I was for Sam Darnold, so that says something. But, Trevor Lawrence, if anything could make him stay at Clemson another year, it might very well be that. As far as it goes with Tua in Miami, again, I've always said Dolphins are my 1A team. I haven't had this kind of enthusiasm for the Dolphins since the late Dan Marino years, so it's looking good for me on at least a medium-term basis with both of the teams I root for in the league. The other team I root for on a medium-term basis is looking good. We'll talk about that in this division here. The AFC North, right now I have it listed in my weekly power rankings. You can find those, of course, every week at the FDH Lounge Multimedia Magazine, the FDHLounge.blogspot.com. I have the AFC North as the toughest division in football right now. You've got Pittsburgh at the top 7-0. That's the one surprise thus far. You and I picked them as a playoff team, but not nearly to this degree. Baltimore 5-2. They've been about as tough as we've expected. Cleveland 5-3. Maybe a little bit of a surprise in terms of the record. We didn't expect that the Browns' record was going to be as marshmallow soft as it's been this year. The schedule in the second half is more of the same. Cincinnati 2-5-1, about where we expected. And you look at this here. Again, Pittsburgh tougher than we expected. I didn't know what Roethlisberger was going to come back like this year. I heard all these things about the defense even being better than last year, and I didn't really tend to believe that, but it has been. As far as the Browns go, I'm going to give credit for everything that's been done. I think Kevin Stefanski probably should be the front runner for Coach of the Year at this point. The Browns are what they are. When they face a really good team, they get squashed. When they face teams they should beat, they generally tend to beat them. But it's a thing where I've been looking at this all along, and as much as I'm going to give credit to the front office for doing a good job by and large, some of the excesses of analytics can be never planting your flag and living for today and not valuing linebackers. And at the trade deadline, those two things came together, like chocolate and peanut butter, unfortunately. There should have been a trade to try to upgrade linebacker, to try to upgrade safety. This back seven is dog crap, partially because of injuries, yes. I can only imagine what this defense will look like with Grant Delpit in there, but Grant Delpit hasn't been there. Greedy Williams hasn't been there. The linebackers, again, I said in the offseason, I wouldn't have let Joe Schobert go, and I hate to be the one to tell you I told you so. But the Browns are doing really well. They're moving in the right direction. But I can't help but be cynical and think that with the attention of the world focused on Election Day on Tuesday, it's a perfect day to just put your hands in your pockets and say, hey, what do you want us to do? No trades to be made. I might believe that, if not for the fact that over the last couple of years, the Browns have been in the top 5 consistently in unused cap room. This is a pattern. And it comes from ownership, which is the one thing I'm still not fond of with this team. And for all I know, the owners might have said, nope, sorry, not taking on any additional salary, in which case the future is bleaker than we would like it to believe in Cleveland. So, general thoughts on the AFC North, Chris Galloway?
Well, I think it's shaking out just how we thought. I think we both thought maybe Baltimore edges out Pittsburgh in that top spot, but we knew Pittsburgh would be good. Look, Pittsburgh they almost made the playoffs with a quarterback named Doug.
Right.
They're well coached. They're a deep team. They got Ben back. So we knew they were going to be better. Are they as good as their record? I'm still not really convinced of that, but they're getting it done, so you can't argue with it.
Right.
I may still be the only guy in America who still does not believe in Lamar Jackson. But I just think as time goes by, teams are going to continue to figure him out. He's regressed in certain areas in terms of passing this year, and I think that's the case as teams, again, start to dial in and build systems around figuring him out. And, one of the things the Browns did, I believe, that drafting of Delpit and Phillips was a direct response to Lamar Jackson.
Right.
What little bit we've seen of Phillips at linebacker this year, because of injury, unfortunately, has impressed the hell out of me. I mean, that guy is linebacker we got, and he is fast.
Yes.
I think we may end up seeing that the analytics are right on that guy, and the grading on him coming out of college was all wrong. I'm keeping an eye on him because I think he may end up being the real deal. And he's exactly a guy you draft, so you spy and you use him to go after Lamar in a game.
Right.
I disagree with you on Schobert. The price point versus the return didn't justify. And I'll tell you right now, Jacksonville fans are sitting there going, why did we sign this piece of crap to a $20 million deal? They're not happy with him. He has played awfully. Pretty bad. He's rated badly this year. So I don't know that was the wrong decision to let Joe go. Right now, I would actually disagree with you and say, he's not playing great in Jacksonville, and that was a lot of money to pay a guy who's not going to play great. So I agree with you that the linebackers are a massive problem. And I think that I think the front office wanted to see what they had in Phillips, Wilson, and Taki, right? They had these young quarterbacks rather young linebackers that are supposed to be quick and, I think they really wanted to see what they had. I think Taki's shown that he is a filler and a special teams guy. I didn't like that pick when they made it. I remember that was the one that was the big special because Dorsey let Wolf take the pick.
Right.
In round 3, and that's who he picked.
Right.
And I remember telling you, I think I did it on this show, that I was not a believer in Wolf. The kid does not impress me. Every time I watched him be interviewed, he didn't strike me as that smart, and I didn't like the pick in round 3 of Taki, and I'm glad he's gone because he showed me everything. I think that kid is gravy training on his father's name. And I said it then, and I'll keep saying it. Somebody prove me wrong.
Okay.
Again, I don't fault the front office for not blowing the bank on some linebackers and when you've got young linebackers that you do need to see what you got. I mean, what if they performed and you didn't need to go up and get some veteran? But to your point, it certainly was lacking. I don't know that other than Phillips, to be honest, I don't think any of these linebackers could even possibly not be back this year.
That is possible.
Other than maybe depth, depth in special teams. Wilson is not impressed. Now I know he had the knee injury, and I'm sure that's hampering him. But I'm not seeing it in Mac Wilson either. He looks kind of slow. And then, so I think that's going to be a focus in the offseason. I think you're right. I think it needs to be. The other thing on trades, I will say this, and again, I think this is definitely the case with analytics, is, look, we don't know how many phone calls Andrew Berry had. I'm sure he had a lot of them about different trades, right? But unless you unless somebody is willing to move at the value that you believe somebody's worth. Let's use a guy like J.J. Watt, that we'll talk about in the next division. It's clear that J.J. Watt should have been dealt, and the Texans have an unrealistic value placed on him versus other teams in the NFL. There are other teams in the NFL that could use a guy like that, even if he's not the guy he used to be. Even the Browns could use that. But if they're going to insist on a ridiculous price, you're not going to make that deal. So, I think another one is a guy like Njoku. I think because of injuries, I think the Browns decided to hold on to him this year,
right,
unless somebody met their price. But again, what are you getting for Njoku at this point? I mean, wouldn't the Packers have made a lot of sense there?
Right.
Maybe they weren't willing to give up more than a sixth, and the Browns said, no, we want a 4, and they couldn't come to an agreement. It's clear the Browns will deal him in the offseason. There's no reason to keep him around. I think the division is exactly where we expect it to be. Cincinnati, look, they just got to build that lineup and build that team around Joe. They've got their quarterback. Their future is solid.
Yep.
Just draft well, build that line, protect him at all costs. I mean, we've seen if you keep him clean, he's going to kill you.
Right. Yeah. He's been amazing. No question about it. The one thing I would just say on Joe Schobert, in fairness, is what he is surrounded by on a Jacksonville defense where they clearly entered the season tanking. Week 1 might have fooled us, but they're tanking this year. I just think he would be making more of a difference here. And as far as it goes with the linebacking core, I think maybe Andrew Berry was a little bit too much of a Wilson Phillips fan back in the day, and I think maybe that's clouding his judgment. He keeps listening to their tunes a little bit too much, and so unfortunately, I don't think that.
Okay. Oh, that's terrible.
Oh, it is. But that's the kind of thing you can expect from me as far as insights go. But as we go to the AFC South, I think the general theme we'd be looking for is a whole lot of meh, because there's nothing that's super impressive here. Tennessee is still a top 10 team in the league, but defensively, and it's been exposed the last couple of weeks, if they don't tighten up, they're going to be one and done in the playoffs. Indianapolis, not to say I told you so, but I said they were going to be up there this year. I said that they would be able to survive this stage of Phillip Rivers' career, and they've basically been able to do that, even with a running game that has not lived up to expectations yet. Marlon Mack being not a part of the equation has certainly not helped matters. I also said this is the year Bill O'Brien gets completely exposed. I didn't think he'd be fired before the end of the year, but I thought this is the year the bottom falls out for Houston, and boy, has it ever. And if Romeo Crennel is the answer, then you're asking the wrong question, but this is just to finish out the season. They're not tanking because my Miami Dolphins happen to have their number 1 pick, so keep losing, Houston, please. And then Jacksonville there at the bottom, 1-6. After week 1, everyone was like, what do you need to tank for Trevor Lawrence for? They have Minshew. Yeah, I think as the season has gone along, we've seen how that goes. So Jacksonville is still in pole position, either for Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. And it looks like it's just going to keep going more so in that same direction. But again, Indianapolis and Houston were the, no pun intended, in terms of the playoffs, but the wild cards coming into the season. Tennessee, I think we knew what we were going to get, a team that is playoff caliber, for whatever that means when 7 teams now make the playoffs. And Jacksonville, we knew where they were going to be. But you and I had not agreed on Indianapolis and Houston. Those were the 2 variables. But this division has not played out, other than that, in terms of any wild surprises.
No surprises. We knew Jackson would be terrible. Obviously, I didn't disagree with you on Bill O'Brien. I was just more like, you have Deshaun Watson. I mean, I just was like, I thought that guy could continue to be Superman and hold it together. Clearly, that's just not the case. And, you talk about a franchise that self-destructed from the inside. Yep. My God. I mean, that's just, it wasn't like they dealt with a bunch of injuries or this or that or, a retirement they didn't expect, or it was just Bill O'Brien, sabotaging his team through stupid trades and bad drafting. I liked, if you recall, Indianapolis. I told you I liked their roster. I didn't believe in Phillip Rivers. I think you've got to admit I wasn't wrong on Phillip Rivers. He's not been good.
Basically.
It's actually a bit of a testament to the quality of that roster.
Sure. Right.
But I think the Colts are the perfect team in the offseason that if the Jets end up with the number 1 or 2 pick, they're going Lawrence or Fields. To me, the Colts are the perfect team with Frank Reich to say, here's a second rounder, give us Sam Darnold.
Right.
That roster and that line screams to me, let's go make a deal for Sam Darnold.
Sure.
Especially, I'm a believer in Frank Reich in terms of quarterback coaching. So I would look for somebody like that in the offseason to make a move and go after him. Here's a question for you, Dolphins fan.
Mm-hmm. Let's
say Houston's going to be terrible the rest of the way. I'm sure their only other win will come against the Browns. They finished 2-14 and end up with the number 2 pick. So that goes to Miami. What do you do, Miami?
You trade out. You trade out.
You trade out? You stick with Tua?
Yes.
Pass on Fields?
Yes. It'd be too early.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, it's too early to pull the plug on Tua. Again, they're playing him right now. They're trying to get an early impression on this, but they didn't set themselves up.
I'll tell you right now, I think that's part of the reason why.
Yeah, it is. I think, they're anticipating that. That's a good point. And I think, yes, they're gonna let it go with Tua because, again, you look at what they've been able to do here. Flores in the front office in Miami, the incredible job they're doing. And oh, by the way, if Miami makes the playoffs, Flores might just edge out Stefanski. The coach of my 1A team might edge out the coach of my 1 team for Coach of the Year. But what they could do with a haul of draft picks here, if you could turn that into like a mini Herschel Walker, and I say mini because nobody does the full-on Herschel Walker anymore, or Ricky Williams, if you will. But what they could do with more picks, that would be amazing.
No, I agree. And I think right now, I agree with you. I think those are your 2 front runners for Coach of the Year, Stefanski and Flores. Now, one of us was a huge Stefanski advocate. I'll let him name
that's you. Yeah.
And then Tennessee, look, I think they are what we thought they are. I mean, 9-7, 10-6, and they may end up, I guess, at 11-5 based on schedule. I still have a lot of questions. I did on Tannehill. He's outperformed them.
Right.
What can you say? I mean, I think if we look back to the preview, I had these 3 teams all close together. Obviously, Houston has completely, to your point, bottomed out in a way I didn't anticipate. But Indy has that great roster with a veteran quarterback who just happens to be in his last year in the NFL and is not very good. And Tennessee, they may end up just being too conservative, maybe their problem eventually. So we'll see. But to your point, no surprises in the South. Jacksonville's a dumpster fire, and they are looking at a total rebuild. My big question to you on Jacksonville is, how much longer are they going to remain in Jacksonville? I mean, really, is the NFL going to allow that to just continue?
Well, now that LA has been filled, LA and Vegas, you have 2 less obvious markets there, so that will alleviate the pressure. But yeah, I mean, it's a good point. They're not even building a team that the local market can get behind. I will say, too, my only caveat on what you said about Tennessee, that they're about what we expected. I would say, but not in the way we would have expected. We would have expected a better defense and not as much out of Ryan Tannehill. They're still arriving at their usual 9-7, but via a different destination than usual. The AFC West, another one. Again, the AFC having less surprises division by division, perhaps, than the NFC. And not a lot in this division that we would be surprised by. I think probably the collapses down the stretch for the Chargers. There always seems to be something with them. They're 2-5. They're bringing up the rear. They've had injuries to be sure, but they should be better than 2-5, particularly with the way Herbert has played at quarterback. Let's start this one working our way up. Denver at 3-4. Not a big surprise there. A lot of people thought they were a bubble playoff team. Same people were probably saying the same about Vegas, bubble playoff team, 4-3. That's right about where they are. Kansas City at 7-1, the class of the division by far. Possibly the class of the NFL coming in. My pick for Super Bowl champions, or I'm sorry, to at least win the AFC this year, to make it back to the Super Bowl, anyways. So this is a thing where, like I said, Chargers worse than anticipated. Even though again they're 2-5 with a -6 point differential. So the Chargers, how they've played for most of the game, every game, has not been far off from what we expected. Their record has been. Other than that, can you really say there have been any surprises at all to any degree in the AFC West?
No, I think that Denver got snake bit by injuries, and I had them as a playoff team. They were one of my surprise playoff teams, and they've had a lot of injuries, and I think that that's really held them back. That just may not be recoverable. I mean, and obviously injuries are always part of every season, and they can derail a season if they're substantial enough. I mean, and losing, Cortland Sutton right out of the gate, was a blow to them, amongst others. So, it's not surprising how that's transpired. Look, Vegas is kind of what we thought they would be. A bubble playoff team, hard-nosed physical football. That's the John Gruden way. They came in last week and just out-physicaled the Browns. Right. I mean, I think that's the 3 losses for the Browns. To me, the telltale sign in all 3 of those losses was they got physically outmatched.
Right.
I mean, they got dominated on both lines physically. But to me, that's the biggest concerning thing if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, the physical nature of those losses. Kansas City, look, cream of the crop in the AFC. We knew that was going to be the case. And in fact, the sort of the little hidden secret about them is that their defense has been way better than people are giving credit for.
Right.
And to your point, probably carries them back to the Super Bowl again this year. The Chargers, man, I can't put my finger on them. I mean, we all knew starting Tyrod Taylor was going to be a disaster, and it was. And unfortunately, what happened to him. But the reality is we all knew he was a 4 or 5 game starter, just like in Cleveland, and then they were going to go to the rookie. You're not winning anything with Tyrod Taylor. I just think that they missed Derwin, right, in the back in that secondary.
Yes, they do.
I just think that he is the stud and the glue on that defense, and that poor guy has just been snake bit with injuries. And in a way, I don't think we anticipated coming out of college because he didn't have that problem in college.
No, he didn't.
So I just, to me, I think that's the Chargers' problem. That, and I think they need to reevaluate their running game in the off season. I think letting Gordon go was probably a mistake. But so I think that's what's sort of given them their fate. That, and they can probably use a new coach.
Very possibly, too, because how long can you just continue to shrug off these things? I mean, Anthony Lynn seems like a good coach, and they don't seem like they've been unsuccessful the last couple of years. They have made the playoffs, I think, at least once since he's been there. But you are getting to the point where it was anticipated that by the time they got to the new stadium that they'd be ready to win. And like you said, Derwin James being out, who we spent a lot of time praising on the preseason show here, him not being in there, yes, that matters. But again, Justin Herbert coming in and doing way better than anticipated as a rookie. Some of that should have evened out, and it certainly hasn't in terms of the one-loss record. Kansas City, like I said, beginning of the year, I understood why a lot of people were going with Baltimore to come out of the AFC because there were only really 2 teams to pick from, I thought. Nobody really saw Pittsburgh as being yet on that level. And again, I understand nobody tends to repeat very much. New England has a few times over the years, and so there's a tendency to go away from Kansas City. But that wasn't persuasive to me. I saw where Kansas City was. I didn't know that they would, expand their defensive prowess any this year. But certainly, like you said, if they did, and they have, that was only going to make them more dangerous. I'm going with Kansas City to win the AFC as I did at the beginning of the year. Sounds like you now agree with me.
I do, and I can't remember the preseason show. I don't think I actually picked into the playoff. I didn't do that prediction game.
Right.
I don't. That's not something I normally do to say, "Oh, this is why I think we'll be in the Super Bowl." I like to playoffs, but then leave it at that because you never know what the state of a team will be at the very end.
True.
Obviously, Kansas City was going to be one of the top teams in the league. I mean, that
right.
was without a doubt. I still say the Steelers are. Man, it's the Steelers. There's always that 3-game losing streak, that Mike Tomlin special in the middle of the year.
Yep.
I still expect that to come. Don't you?
Yes.
I mean, historically, there's that moment where you suddenly start playing not up to their potential, and it goes on for several weeks, and everybody goes, what the hell is wrong with the Steelers? I still expect that to come. And, right now, it's to your point, it's clearly Kansas City. As you know, I'm so critical of Lamar Jackson. I would never have picked Baltimore to go to the Super Bowl with him, and I'm still not going to.
Sure.
So I expect a swoon by Pittsburgh. Again, Baltimore's going to be competitive. They're going to win a lot of games. That defense and that running game are just so good that they are going to win games, and it's clearly the class is Kansas City right now of the AFC. I would say Buffalo is a team that if they got hot at the end is built in a way that might give the Chiefs trouble. So just kind of keep an eye on that.
Well, that would have a real 90s flair to it if we got a Bills-Chiefs AFC championship game. What was the season? I think 93 when that happened. But as far as it goes, with Pittsburgh, the only thing that scares me...
Yeah, where are you, Christian Okoye?
A nation turns its lonely eyes to you. But as far as, it goes with Pittsburgh, the cynical part of me as a Steeler hater is that anytime they haven't had to worry about New England, and clearly they don't this year, it's always been clear sailing. It's all, from my cynical mind, paying bounties to a dumb team like the Rex Ryan Jets to play spoiler and take them out for you, or you have other teams do your dirty work for you. Who was it in 05? Was it Denver? They probably collected a fat bounty for fluking it out on New England in that Saturday night playoff game. So for Pittsburgh, they don't even have to pay a bounty to a team this year to play spoiler. So... that part kind of worries me a little bit as far as them sneaking through because they can't beat New England, but anybody else at any time, clearly they have been. But yeah, I'm going to stay with Kansas City, and we'll see how the AFC plays out. Our next segment will be looking at the NFC at midseason in 2020. I thank my good friend and fellow FDH Lounge original dignitary Chris Galloway for this, and I thank you everybody for tuning in to FDH Lounge mini episode 1302.